What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Toma Todito Boxing Show, and let's keep going with the events that took place this past Saturday. We talk about how the world was tuned in to the Dimitri Bivol big undisputed clash showdown against Artur Beterbiev, where Beterbiev ends up coming out the victor, gets his hand raised by way of decision, and enter the era of King Arthur out in Riyadh. And all the attention of the boxing world was focused and tuned in to what was taking place there. It was a nice card, a big card, where Fabio Worley was also featured in it. Chris Eubank Jr. Now the future looks like Chris Eubank Jr. is going to be heading towards the clash that once got away from him between him and Conor Benn. A lot that happened in that event. But while that was happening and while all the attention was focused there out in Riyadh, a lot of people, a lot of the boxing world forgot that there was a big 2-day festival, boxing festival that was taking place. I guess we could call it a boxing festival. A big 2-day showing of some of the absolute best boxers in the world today as it relates to the lighter weight divisions. And there was a lot of news and a lot of rumors that came out of this weekend, and we're going to jump right into that. This took place out in Japan, and we're going to take our focus overseas to Japan and cover every single one of these 3 events that took place over there. 3 fight cards in 2 days, and a lot happened. And we're going to go ahead and talk about the winners and the losers. In 2 fight cards, I calculated 7 world titles that were in play. That's how big of an event this was. And a lot of people were not talking about it. Most were not. The big television networks, of course, that were covering those events or multiple events, well, they were aware of it. Other than that, people caught wind of it because of one, Saul Canelo Alvarez happened to make his way towards Japan on October 13th. And he happened to be on hand, and so that caught people's eye and people started researching. But if it wasn't for that, a lot of people would have ignored this. Now, there was 2 big fights that were taking place, or 2 big headlining events, and 3 big names involved within 3 different cards. The 2 biggest names, Takuma Inoue on the 13th, headlining, and who he put his title on the line, and a fellow bantamweight champion, Junto Nakatani, putting this title on the line on the very next morning. At least morning for us. The very next day for Japan, I think it's their evening boxing over there. For us, it's in the morning. We usually get those cards around 4 or 5 in the morning, stateside. So let's jump right in, because Japan, in my opinion, every time I tune into these cards, they deliver. They are action-packed, and it is a different style, a different flow of boxing, and a different crowd, a different fan base. And I thoroughly enjoy these cards whenever I get a chance to check them out, more notably when Naoya Inoue fights. So October 13th, Sunday, we get Canelo Alvarez on hand, which all reports said that he was there to support, lend a hand and lend support to his fellow stablemate, veteran Nicaraguan fighter Christopher Rosales, who was actually on the card fighting against Kenshiro Teraji for the vacant WBC flyweight title, 112 pounds. Eddie Reynoso on the corner of Christopher Rosales, and 2 rows behind the ring, Canelo Alvarez was there along with his wife, witnessing this fight. 2 fights later, Naoya Inoue is in the same shot as Canelo Alvarez, as he is on the corner of his brother Takuma Inoue, who was defending his title in the main event. So let's jump into this card, because I just mentioned to you that there was at least a tally of 7 world titles that were in play. In this very card alone, hosted at the Ariake Arena in Tokyo, Japan, the first title that was on the line that night, early in the night, was the vacant WBO 108-pound title, the light flyweight title. Vacant WBO title disputed between Spaniard Jairo Noriega, undefeated fighter stepping into the ring, against Shokichi Iwata, fighting in front of his home crowd. 13-1, Shokichi Iwata. Jairo Noriega, 14-0. And Iwata just took the action, took the pressure, punches and bunches, stops the Spaniard Noriega in 3 rounds to claim the vacant WBO title and crown himself as the newest champion in that division. The next fight, we see a portion of the reason why Canelo Alvarez was there, and we'll talk about the other rumor mill that, or at least the other rumors that are floating around surrounding Canelo Alvarez and why he was actually in Japan. I'm sure this was one of the big reasons why he was there, to support his fellow stablemate. Christopher Rosales, trained by Eddie Reynoso, 37-6, stepping into the ring, veteran fighter out of Nicaragua, challenging Kenshiro Teraji for the vacant WBC flyweight title. This is the title that Bam Rodriguez vacated. If you guys remember, a few months back, those of you that keep tabs on the show, on this Toma Todito Boxing show in my YouTube channel, if you guys remember, if you don't, then go back and check out that video. I interviewed Ricardo Sandoval, who fought on the undercard of William Cepeda and Giovanni Cabrera this past summer. And I interviewed him as he came out of that victory over Tito Acosta, who's promoted by Miguel Cotto, and he got a portion of the WBC title for this very same division. And he said, if I don't get to fight Bam Rodriguez, word is that Bam Rodriguez is going to be vacating this title and I should be able to fight for the vacant title. Well, this is the same title. Bam Rodriguez has now vacated officially. This title was in line between Taraji and Christopher Rosales. A great back and forth showing between the veteran fighter and Rosales, but he was a little too slow and just behind the curve on the action style of Kenshiro Teraji. Teraji stops Rosales in the 11th round and picks up the WBC flyweight title, crowning himself as the newest champion within that division. In that very same division, in the next fight, now fellow champion for Teraji, who's the newly crowned champ there for the WBC, the WBA champ was in action in Seigo Akui. And you guys know I'm really big on Seigo Akui, and you guys could check back in the catalog of the podcast that Seigo Akui at the beginning of this year crowned himself the WBA champ for this very same division, joining the likes of then champion Bam Rodriguez, who had recently dethroned a month earlier to Seigo Akui picking up that title. He had dethroned Sonny Edwards in their big unification bout that took place in Arizona. Bam Rodriguez unifies titles by stopping Sonny Edwards, Artem Delakian being the other champion. You guys know that I've always been very critical, or I've been critical of Artem Delakian because he was a champion that held this title hostage, basically. He held this title hostage and would do the absolute minimum to defend it, with his defenses usually taking place in January of each calendar year. And for the past 3, 4, 5 years, I think, he did that. And this was nothing different. This was nothing new for him, except he happened to get dethroned earlier this year by Seigo Akui. And Seigo Akui, by dethroning Artem Delakian, joined the likes of Bam Rodriguez as a fellow champion in that division, and has been as active of a champion as you could ever ask for. Seigo Akui, this was his second title defense this year. He picked it up in January, defended it early summer, and this is his second defense, and he ends up getting the split decision to retain his WBA title in that division over Tananchai Sherumfak, who was a 25-1 fighter, Seigo Akui has now handed him the second loss of his career, and Akui improves to 21-2-1. And now has a fellow countryman that has joined him as a fellow champion within that division in Kenshiro Teraji, who picked up the vacant title by defeating Christopher Rosales earlier in the night. That's 3 titles, world titles, that we already spoke about. We get to the main event, and this is when you see that shot that was all over the news where Naoya Inoue is focused on the corner, on the fight, on the action taking place in the ring between his brother and challenger Seiya Susumi. And in the background, you could see Canelo Alvarez sitting alongside his wife. And that's the news that started swirling around the world, sports news, and around the sports world as to what the hell's Canelo Alvarez doing there in Japan. All reasons pointed to him being there to support his fellow stablemate and Rosales and his trainer Eddie Reynoso. But the rumors have now come about that there's a planned co-main event between him and Naoya Inoue potentially taking place prior to the close of this calendar year. Naoya Inoue will be defending his title against Sam Goodman, who's one of his mandatories, on Christmas Eve of this calendar year, 2024. And Canelo Alvarez, the reason the rumors have begun is because earlier this year he expressed interest in 1, fighting in Japan. 2, he's expressed multiple times that he would like to have fought or at least fight 3 times in 2024. That was earlier this year. He's gotten 2 fights this year where he's incurred minimal damage on both fights. Chances are that he would be able to prepare in time for a showdown by Christmas Eve and accomplish his goal of having 3 fights this calendar year and his dreams of fighting abroad in Japan. Let alone, the reason this rumor is getting so big is because they would end up sending a message to the boxing world that if they came together as individual fighters between Naoya Inoue, the monster Naoya Inoue, 2-time undisputed champ at 118 and 122, the pool of fan base that he has, the pool that Naoya Inoue and the attraction that he brings to the sport, or the attention that he garners from the sport and the fan base, and what Canelo Alvarez brings to the sport, the two of them coming together as a co-main event or a co-feature in the same card, especially in the special of a date as a Christmas Eve prior to the close of this calendar year, it would basically send a message to the rest of the boxing world that's being dominated by Turki Al-Sheikh and Riyadh Season. And rightfully so, because Turki Al-Sheikh is bringing, and the Saudis are bringing some of the biggest fights that fans have been asking for so long. They've been able to put those cards together, fan-friendly cards, all action-packed cards, and highlighting some of the best boxers, pinning them against other great boxers within the sports boxing world. The biggest cards that they've been able to make to date were Tyson Fury and Usyk. They were behind the Crawford-Madrimov arrival here in LA for Riyadh Season in California. They just put together Arthur Beterbiev, Dimitri Bivol. They've been behind some of the biggest cards and fights to date since their involvement with the sport. So that's where the rumor mill is at. That if Canelo Alvarez and Naoya Inoue come together, join forces to put on a big event themselves in a co-feature style to close out this calendar year, they would basically send a message to the rest of the boxing world that they don't need Riyadh, they don't need Turkey to be able to put on big events themselves. In what would likely be a co-feature with Top Rank and Canelo Alvarez Promotions. If he's able to involve Eddie Hearn, if he's able to involve PBC, you know that would be big. Top Rank and PBC. Unlikely matchup, but it's happened. So as this famous shot that started going around the world around the sports world of Naoya Inoue, with the background being with Canelo being in the background, the main event was taking place in the ring between Naoya's younger brother Takuma Inoue, who was defending his WBA title in the bantamweight division, against Seiya Susumi. An all-action fight, a great main event that did not disappoint, and it was as action-packed as you could have hoped for, with momentum switching from one fighter to the next, and Susumi capitalizing down the final stretch, getting the best of Inoue, being off balance, keeping him off balance, landing the bigger punches, and doing enough to get the judges to see the decision and render the decision in his favor, dethroning Takuma Inoue, lifting the title, and becoming the newest bantamweight champion within the bantamweight division. The WBA champ is now Seiya Susumi. Remains undefeated, 12-0 with 2 draws. Inoue suffers the second defeat of his career and loses his title. What else is surrounding this is the fact that the plans that Bob Arum had were for Junto Nakatani, who's going to be fighting, or who fought the very next night. The plans have been for Junto Nakatani to unify titles against Takuma Inoue, and should he be successful in defeating the young Inoue, he would shoot up one division north and challenge the older brother Naoya Inoue in what would be a mega fight. And according to Bob Arum earlier this year, he would shoot for Junto Nakatani and Naoya Inoue to take place in Las Vegas in 2025 around May. With Takuma losing, that throws a wrench in those plans for Junto. Other rumors that are swirling around is that Bam Rodriguez, he has a fight coming up that he's co-featured with Boots Ennis in November. Rumors for Bam is that he would fight the fourth and remaining legend of the Princes of 115, being Chocolatito Gonzalez, who was his former sparring partner, who helped him prepare for Gallo Estrada earlier this year. The legend killer in Bam has started with Cuadras, followed up by stopping Sorung Vesai, dethroned Gallo Estrada and stopped him, and the remaining legend happens to be Chocolatito for Bam to conquer. But he has a different fight coming up as a co-feature of the Boots Ennis card in November. So Bam has either Chocolatito, Gallo Estrada seems like he's asking for that rematch. He's going to execute on his rematch clause with Bam Rodriguez, and he wants to run it back and avenge his loss to Bam. And rumors are swirling that Bam Rodriguez would like to go up to 118 and challenge himself against one Junto Nakatani, who is the dominant force at 118, with Takuma having been the second strongest of the 4 champions. Well, Takuma has now been dethroned, and Seiya Susumi became the newest bantamweight champ. 4 titles in this one card. This very same day, we have Riel Casimero, who is fighting elsewhere in Japan on his own card. He's been on the up and up, trying to get his career back into flow. And again, controversy surrounds Casimero. If we remember, Riel Casimero was just demolishing his opposition when he came to prominence within the sport of boxing in the bantamweight division. He ends up unifying titles with Solani Tete back in 2019, goes on to defend the title against Duke Maika, goes on to defend the title against legendary Cuban fighter Guillermo Rigendo. From there, he was supposed to unify titles against Nonito Donaire, who was then champion. But Casimero, due to the insults and the back and forth that took place between him and Donaire, and insulting Donaire's wife and all this, Donaire decided to take his talent elsewhere, and that fight fell through. Negotiations fell apart. Nonito said, I'm not going to honor you by fighting you. You're not going to make a single cent off of me. And they went their separate ways. Casimero then ends up negotiating a fight with fellow champion Paul Butler, who was also champ at that time in that division. That fight is ready to take place, and just within days, if not hours of that fight happening, the fight falls through because Casimero failed to make weight and is later reported that he got hospitalized due to gastritis and severe dehydration and doesn't make it to the ring against Paul Butler. The fight falls through, gets rescheduled, gets renegotiated. And in the lead up to that fight, the UK Boxing Commission discovers that John Riel Casimero was utilizing a sauna in order to cut weight and successfully make weight for his fight against Paul Butler that had now been rescheduled. And apparently that's something that is a no-no for the UK Boxing Commission, and they suspend him. And the fight falls through once again. Paul Butler would end up defending his title against Naoya Inoue, who was now conquering the bantamweight division at that time. And Inoue stops Butler and became the undisputed champ at 118, immediately relinquishing shortly thereafter and taking his talents to 122. And that's how all that played out. Well, Casimero has since tried to be on the up and up. He came back in December of 22 and defeated Rio Acajo. May of 23, defeated Philippis in Tumba. October of last year, a year ago, he defeated Yukinori Oguni. He ended up in a draw, a technical decision draw, in a fight that was stopped in the 4th round with Yukinori Oguni. And was out for an entire year to the day until he was in the ring this past weekend and came away with an emphatic knockout victory over veteran fighter Saul Sanchez. Drops him twice before the referee deems as too much, all taking place in the 1st round. Casimero looked amazing, and he steps out of the ring and is handed a 1-year suspension by the Japanese Boxing Commission because, again, he failed to make weight. He gets to the scales at 124, is given 2 hours to cut weight, ends up cutting down to 123 and a quarter, steps into the ring, blows Saul Sanchez out of the water, just blasts him with a great knockout victory, and ends up losing outside of the ring with that 1-year suspension, 1-year ban from the Japanese Boxing Commission, unbeknownst to the crowd on hand. So it's a win-lose for Casimero, who again is surrounded by controversy. In that very same card, his 2 prior opponents, Yukinori Oguni, fought Philippis and Tumba and lost by TKO, and Tumba coming out with that TKO victory. And the other fight of note there was Vince Paras, who was in a trilogy fight against Hiroto Kyoguchi in front of a home crowd for Kyoguchi. This fight was taking place in Yokohama, Japan. And if you guys remember, Kyoguchi beat Paras back in 2018. Paras has since been on a roll, asked for this fight to run it back, and got the decision over Kyoguchi in May of this year. Kyoguchi then rightfully asked for the trilogy fight for the rubber match, and Vince Paras, Filipino fighter, honors that request, and that's how we got this trilogy fight. And again, a back and forth slugfest between these 2 young fighters, and Kyoguchi ends up getting the majority decision and wins the trilogy between him and Vince Paras. That's how much was going on in Japan between the Canelo news, the Naoya news, Takuma getting dethroned, John Riel Casimero getting banned. All this taking place on the 13th, and we move on to the 14th, the very next day, the second day of what everybody's considering the boxing festival that took place, was headlined by Junto Nakatani. He's attracting a lot of attention, and he's within a fight or 2 away from becoming a household name to the level of Naoya Inoue, let alone if he's able to dethrone Naoya Inoue. The way that he's performing is garnering that much more attention behind this young Japanese fighter. Junto Nakatani put his title on the line. Against Pech Sipi Freshmart, also known as Tasana Salapat. The veteran Thai fighter with 76 wins, 53 knockouts. Only one loss stepping into the ring, and that one loss came at the hands of Takuma Inoue, who was 12-0 when Takuma beat him, handing him the first loss of his career. That was in 2018. He went on to put another dozen plus victories together, and now got stopped by the one and only Junto Nakatani. The first stoppage loss of his career for Salapat, 76-2 record now. Amazing record by this Thai fighter, an amazing fighter, both in Muay Thai, kickboxing, and boxing. Junto Nakatani stops him and steals the show the very next night on the 14th with a 6-round TKO stoppage. After dropping him several times, it's finally called by the referee. Junto Nakatani comes away with the stoppage win in the 6th round, gets his 29th victory, his 22nd knockout, and successfully retains the WBC bantamweight title and remains the top dog at the 118-pound division. With Takuma Inoue being dethroned the night prior, we'll see if Junto Nakatani is going to want to unify the rest of the division or if he's just going to shoot straight north to Naoya Inoue come May. But he definitely wants to be active between October and May. So we'll see if he tries to unify against one of the other fellow champions. All 4 champions in the 118 division are all 4 Japanese fighters. All very good fighters. The strongest having been, or is, Junto Nakatani, and the second best having been Takuma Inoue. Well, Junto's definitely the strongest of the champs now, so either he's going to unify between now and May with one of the fellow champs, the newest being Susumi, who dethroned Takuma the night prior, or he may have a big showdown with Bam Rodriguez if he decides to take his talents north from 115 to 118 and challenge Junto. Big, huge payday. Nakatani is 1 or 2 fights away from becoming a household name, similar to the status of Naoya Inoue. Mark my words. Junto Nakatani, for those of you that don't know, trains out of Los Angeles under the tutelage of Rudy Hernandez. Rudy Hernandez is not just a great veteran trainer within the sport of boxing, but is also a cutman within the sport of boxing, and is also a cutman in MMA, famously taking the corner and cornering numerous fighters throughout his storied history within the UFC. Opposite corners of Stitch, and you name it. Rudy Hernandez is a who's who within the combat sports world. And brother of the late Chicanito Hernandez. Those of you that don't know about Chicanito Hernandez, go back and look up who Chicanito Hernandez was within the sport of boxing in the mid to late 80s and early 90s. Amazing champion, Mexican fighter. And you could see a lot of similarities between the way that Rudy Hernandez is training Junto Nakatani and the way the style of Junto Nakatani up on that ring, which stands apart from how the traditional Japanese style of boxing is. The traditional Japanese boxers in Junto Nakatani stands aside from that and has a lot of Mexican influence in his style when up on that ring. Rudy Hernandez, it's almost like he's training him or having him do similar things to what his brother used to be able to do, the attributes that his brother possessed up in that ring. Those of you that don't remember Chicanito Hernandez, amazing record, amazing trajectory, amazing resume by Chicanito Hernandez, and 2 losses, the only 2 losses to his record, if I remember correctly, and I'm pretty sure I'm right on this. Chicanito Hernandez suffered 2 defeats. The first defeat of his career came against Hall of Famer and legendary fighter Oscar De La Hoya, who was on his ascension when he faced Chicanito Hernandez and was just ravaging through all the Mexican and Mexican-American champions and fighters at that time, similar to how he faced Maromero Páez. He had faced Gabriel Ruelas, Antonio Campanella. He went through Chicanito Hernandez, handing him the first defeat and lifting the title from Chicanito Hernandez at that time. The second defeat that Chicanito Hernandez ended up in his resume with was to none other than Floyd Mayweather Jr. Just think about that. That's how great Chicanito Hernandez was. Yes, he lost against these 2 great fighters, but look at what these guys became just years down the line. And that's the position that Chicanito Hernandez was in, to have garnered those big fights at that stage of his career. And that's the lineage with Rudy Hernandez, training Junto Nakatani. And if you put clips of Chicanito Hernandez fighting in the center of the ring with the way that Junto Nakatani fights, you'll see a lot of similarities in his boxing style. Another title on the line, that's already the 5th title that we've talked about. Another title on the line on this undercard was the WBO 115-pound title. Same division as Bam. We're just talking about Bam. Kosei Tanaka puts his title on the line against lesser-known, undefeated fighter out of South Africa, Phumile Kafu. And Kafu does enough to muddy the waters, counter, and make this fight into a difficult drag-out type fight where he beat Tanaka to the punch throughout the entire night and got the decision handed by the judges, manages to get the split decision, and lifts the title from Kosei Tanaka to become the newest WBO super flyweight champion. He has now joined the ranks of fellow champion Bam Rodriguez within that 115-pound division. The lesser-known Phumile Kafu put on a great performance, remains undefeated, and now 11-0 with 3 draws to his record, handing the second defeat to Kosei Tanaka and lifting the title while doing so. Anthony Olascagua was also on the undercard. He became champion at flyweight. We just talked about Seigo Akui the night prior, and Taraji. And Olascagua is the WBO champ for that division. Puts his title on the line against Puerto Rican fighter Jonathan Gonzalez. And the fight comes to a close in the very opening round. It is deemed a no contest due to Jonathan Gonzalez suffering a cut over his left eye. The fight is brought to a close. He's deemed not being able to continue. Anthony Olascagua retains his title, or at least leaves Japan with his title in place, and remains champion within that 112-pound division. More than likely, this fight will be revisited, renegotiated, and rescheduled for later on, either this calendar year or to kick off 2025 for them. 7 major world titles in play, and the big 3 events, Casimero also being there, and a lot of stuff, a lot of stories that have come about now between if Canelo is really there to secure a fight out in Japan, if he will actually visit the idea of a December card co-feature with Naoya Inoue. Junto Nakatani will go straight to Naoya Inoue come 2025, now that Takuma, his younger brother, got dethroned the night prior. Potentially a showdown between Nakatani Bam. New champions in Kafu. Casimero continues to be surrounded by controversy. A lot happened in Japan, and everybody's attention was tuned into Riyadh, rightfully so, because it was a huge fight between Dimitri Bivol and Arthur Beterbiev. But a lot was happening within the boxing world, and a lot of movement between these titles. 7 major world titles between these 3 cards that took place in what many considered a 2-day boxing festival out in Japan, October 13th and October 14th. For us, it was Sunday and Monday. For Japan, it was actually Saturday, Sunday event. So a lot to take from these 3 cards, and all 3 amazing events with amazing action. It's very enjoyable. If you haven't checked out these Japanese style or these Japanese fight cards, the Japanese style is very fan friendly, very easy to adjust to, and there's no playing around. There's no delays, no talking, no selling, no hype jobs. They just get in there and they exchange, and it's fun to watch. It's a hell of a time. You owe it to yourself if you haven't checked these out. Go do some research. Check out Chicanito Hernandez since I mentioned him. Look at his resume. Look up who Rudy Hernandez is if you're not familiar with him. He's a legend in the sport and in the combat sports world. And Junto Nakatani, mark my words, he's maybe a fight away to being a household name. And let alone, just imagine that the narrative is out there that if he faces Naoya Inoue, a lot of people are leaning with Junto Nakatani to be the one to dethrone the monster. Just think about that. That's crazy. That's how good this guy is. But I will say this as a asterisk or as a disclaimer. This is the most. Petak CP Freshmart is the fighter that has connected the most, in my opinion, with as many clean shots as he landed on Junto. It left a little bit, it left an impression in my head because the fight seemed a lot closer than it actually played out to be, as Salapat was landing some really good exchanges and walking through some punches and absorbing a lot of the damage that Nakatani was delivering. But in the end, it ended up being a little too much for Freshmart to handle, and Nakatani stops him in the 6th. So I told you guys, a lot of boxing, a lot to cover, and it's exciting, and we're going to keep going. We got plenty of boxing to talk about for the coming days, and we also got some previews that we got to look at that are taking place this coming weekend as we approach this weekend. So a lot to talk about. Thank you guys again for tuning in, and continue to check out the episodes. If you don't follow me on your favorite podcast platform, then you could follow me on YouTube. These episodes also go up on YouTube, just in audio format. And feel free to subscribe, and you could click that reminder bell, and you'll get the reminder whenever a new episode is uploaded. And those of you that follow me and that support the interviews that I conduct with fighters, and the content that I'm bringing to you guys, thank you guys so much, because you're the reason why the show continues to grow. So I thank you guys. Take care of yourselves. Have a great night, and we'll continue talking boxing. So check me out on the next episode. Take care.